I'm about to embark on this big task. So I'm going to start with removing the catalytic converter. But one thing that's different when this is an aftermarket one, obviously. But if you have the OEM, you're probably going to have to take off the muffler itself, or at least remove this and let it dangle. But I'm going to go ahead and take this off and then remove this O2 sensor. And one thing I want to note is if you're going to take this off, make sure you unplug the wire inside, so as you're turning this, it doesn't twist the wire. And then when you put it back in, make sure it's unplugged. That way the wire twists along with the as you're screwing it in, and then plug it back in. But anyway, I'm going to take this off, and then from there I'm going to go and work my way right to left. I'm going to go and take the lines off here, the oil line and the coolant line to the bearings, and then I'm going to remove the actuator, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove this also, this inlet pipe. And once that's done, I should have plenty of room. As you can see here, I have the first coil, and then there's the second coil is right behind here. There is a little bit of room, but obviously not a whole lot. But once the oil lines are sort of shifted out of the way, it should make it a little bit easier. And then obviously the big issue, or at least the tough one, is right back there behind the actuator. Once I remove the actuator and then also this inlet pipe, where everything kind of shifts over a little bit, that should give me a little bit more room. But anyway, let me get started here. Okay, so I got the bolts out and the screw, the nuts. 2 came out as screws and 2 came out as nuts. But anyway, as you can see here, the screws here, then this came out with it. I decided not to remove the O2 sensor and decided to support it with a bungee cord, and should just move to the side and just let it hang. The oil line is off and out of the way. Now it's time to remove this line, and it's supported by a T30 torque screw, and here's the torque. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off because I need 2 hands to pry this out gently. Okay, the hose is loose now, as you can see, but one thing I want to note is gently pry this out slowly. I mean, like really slow, so that way you don't break this connector here, or this portion here, or bend it. Once you get a little bit of gap in here, all you have to do is put your screwdriver in here and just kind of twist it, and it'll come out. It's supported with 2 O-rings on the inside here. Yeah, coolant's coming out, so I'm gonna get a bucket. So there was actually quite a bit of coolant leak, as you can see down here. One thing I did notice was the O-rings were pretty flat. So what I'm gonna do is go to the dealership tomorrow and pick myself up some new O-rings for these connectors. Since I'm changing out the coils, and since I pulled these bad boys out, I might as well go ahead and change out the O-rings since I'm here. Okay, now I'm gonna go and try to remove the actuator, which is this unit here, and it actually helps to have one of these extended Allen sockets, and this is a 3/16, but I believe it may be a 7mm or so. I don't have one, so I used a 3/16 and it worked. So there's a 3rd screw for the actuator. So I got the 2 top ones out, as you can see right up here, right here. And there's a 3rd one. I'm gonna try to flip the camera here. As you can see, it's right there where the socket's at. So that's the 3rd one. once you remove that, the actuator should be able to come out. It's right behind the turbo, as you can see. So the actuator is loose now, and one thing I want to mention is this bracket needs to be taken off, and it connects to, or at least it's holding this this hose on the backside in place. So I removed the 10mm nut here on the bottom side, and I removed the torque screw on the backside as well. It actually sits right up in here, if you can see. And once that's removed, you can pry this down a little bit and then move the bracket out of the way. But yeah, this is it. So it sits up against the hose. I removed this as well, and once you take this out, it doesn't move much, but just a little bit, and it should be enough to try to wiggle the actuator out. But don't forget to disconnect the line to the actuator as well. Once that's out, I should have a lot more room to get to that coil, even though this is slightly in the way. So I might end up taking this out from the top side as well. All right, so the Y pipe and air filter housing is out. I was able to move this slightly, not a whole lot of movement. I tried to twist it to the right, so that way the hose in the bottom could move out a little bit. And there was some slight movement, maybe a quarter of an inch, half an inch, but you know, it's good enough. I think I might take the BVR off as well and pull this up some more to give me a little bit more room, but right now it's just kind of hitting up against it. It's kind of annoying, but if I get this out of the way, I should be able to maybe bend this out a little bit more and then have a little bit better path to the coil. But that last screw is a little tough, but you know, once you get that back in, you have a small gap. Should be able to get a socket in there. All right, so the coil is out, or should I say out of the housing or the engine block. I need to move this bracket out of the way here, this one, to give myself a little bit more room. Hopefully I can get my hand in there, but if I can get this bracket out, I might be able to give myself a little bit more room to get in there. And that bracket is actually for the heat shield, so probably should have been one of the first things I should have taken off earlier. Okay, success. So, a couple of things. I really had to force this out after I had loosened up all of this up here. And one thing I want to note is take this piece off of the little brackets here, because otherwise you'll pinch it up against this nut or this nut and screw for your upper control arm. And the second thing I did was this bracket sits right here, right up in here, and it actually is in the way. So this bracket has a little plastic bracket in itself that holds the actuator cable, and then it holds this other cable right here in between this section right there. So anyway, I loosened that up, moved it out of the way. That gave me plenty of room to reach my hand in here. And then I used my index finger to pinch the clip in the connector. And believe it or not, I used this wooden Home Depot mixer and kind of pried it off. So now it comes out. Yeah. Number 3 on bank 1 is a pain, but if you take your time, you'll get through it and you'll get it out. About to put in the new spark plug, and I put a little anti-seize on the thread. So here we go. make sure that it doesn't cross thread. All right, coil 3 or 1, however you want to call it, is in. It took me a while to connect the connector because it was hard to line it up. But one thing I want to note is with these new screws, these torque screws, it's really hard to get a socket in here. So you're gonna have to get an 8mm. Hopefully sort of an open-end ratchet, and tighten it that way. Take your time. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Okay, so I'm putting in the second coil now, and it's really tough going through this angle, so you want to be able to go through the backside here. And given that the coolant lines are loose, or the oil and coolant lines are loose, I can slightly move those out of the way and kind of slide this in here. There we go. Now it's in. And then I want to go and slide the get some light in here. I'm sliding the coil connector here. So the coil is in, and I just need to tighten it up. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is removing this this connector. So it sits right in here, as you can see, and all you have to do is pinch down on this right here. Pinch down on that and pull it out, and it should be fine. Don't make the mistake of pulling it out like I did earlier, but it's just a snap-on. You pinch, snaps right in, and easy to move. Push down and pull it out, but move it out of the way. That'll give you some more room, in addition to the bracket that was over here. This one that I took earlier, that dropped into the coolant bucket here. But anyway, I'm going to tighten this up, and like I said earlier, it is extremely helpful if you have an 8mm ratchet open-end wrench, because that allows you to get in here, because the socket is not going to be able to get in here. The torque socket, as you can see. So it's best to basically find one of those little 8mm, and it's extremely helpful for tight spaces. And this only requires about 10 foot-pound of torque. So don't over tighten it, obviously. There you go. That should be good. That's it. And then again, double check, make sure this is in properly. Like I said, all you have to do is kind of lift this up and see. But I heard a click earlier, and it is secure. Verification. Yep, it is secure. It is on the clip. Then moving to the next one. But again, always double check, because the last thing I want to do is take this thing apart again. All right, so for the last one, I'm gonna go ahead and take this piece so I won't forget, snap it in. And that's secure. Perfect. And then comes the second piece, or sorry, the second coil. Just pull that bad boy down. Get that to seat properly. Now, this is the easiest one so far. Sometimes that boot gets in the way. See, that did not click. There it is, secured. And then obviously double check, raise it up a little bit. Oops. Yep, it's clipped in. There it is. Nice and secure. So before I make my final check and also securing this pipe, this inlet pipe, I went ahead and made sure that this piece was secure. So if you look closely, and I'm gonna try to point it out, on this side, this over here. Let's see if I get a better view. This is part of the inlet pipe. That right there. So it connects to this plastic piece. It connects to this plastic piece here. And it's a contact. It's not a hose. It's just sort of a open, I want to call it a grommet. But if I move this, you might be able to see it move up and down. Yeah, just a tad. It moves just a tad. But anyway, make sure this is secured into this area, because when you lift this up and twist it to give yourself a little bit more room for this out of the way, that needs to be resecured. And if it's not, it's going to be a misaligned, and then when you try to put everything else together, especially the air filter housing, it's not going to line up correctly. So anyway, that's just another tip. The O-rings and studs finally came in. So here are the part numbers for the coolant O-rings. And here's the part number for the oil O-rings. So I'll be installing these right now. Yeah, these are done. I mean, you can just tell. Oh man, that's broke fairly easily. Look at that. Surprised these haven't already started leaking. We'll have to try to clean that a little bit there. Some WD-40 or so. I don't use any other chemicals. Glad I didn't cut my fingernails yet, because I can actually use my fingernails to kind of dig in here. Like I said, this is the coolant. So I'm just going to try to slide these on here with a tad bit of a solvent, and the solvent is just water or or Windex, or you can use the coolant itself. There it is. And now, time to push it back up and pop it back in. Okay, so now it's in place. I just need to sort of pop it in, and the easiest way to do that is just basically put the screw in and tighten it. Do it slowly and definitely make sure that the O-ring seats properly in there. Yep. And we are good. So as you can see, the O-ring basically did not come out, and it sealed properly. All right. This is going to be maybe a little more challenging because it's a weird angle. But yeah, this comes up fairly easily. It's like, again, not too bad, but as you can see, the snap broke fairly easily. Is this good? Okay. And it definitely lost its shape when I try to pull it, so highly recommend changing these out. And I use the coolant solvent to put these on. Go. Then second one is here. Goes right down. I recommend pulling this down a little bit and then pushing in. And there we go, properly seated. And then you tighten the torque screw. There you go. Just an added protection, just make sure it's covered properly. And now it's the oil ring. or the oil O-ring. This is not too bad. This is pretty good. So coolant ones are just done. Again, pretty good as well. I use my fingernail to basically kind of dig in there, clean out the grooves. And then give a little squirt, WD-40. Lubricate the O-ring a little bit. First one's in. Again, just lubricate it with a little bit of WD-40. It should slide in fairly easily. And there it is. Now, push it in. Make sure it's properly seated. There you go. And then properly torques it, or use the torque screw rather. Where is my ratchet? That should be good. I don't want to strip it, so it should be in now. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Now for these bad boys. And here is the part number. You can see it. For the studs. And then the part number for the screws. I'll post those on the comment section as well. But yeah, here they are. So basically, the short threaded side right here goes into the turbo housing. Hand tighten is fine. So everything's back in now. I had already double checked the different connections for the turbo side and after the installation of the coils and spark plugs. And the last piece, or the coolant line and oil lines, and obviously the cal converter. So anyway, all that's done. I don't plan to put the intercoolers back in yet, because I'm actually upgrading those as well since I'm in here. So I'm doing a lot of stuff that I wouldn't normally do, or at least not yet. But since I'm already in here and taking quite a bit apart, I decided to go ahead and upgrade the intercoolers as well. And just like I did with the left-hand side of the car, I'm going to work my way forward. So first thing to do is take this clip off, move this out of the way, and then eventually I'm going to take this off, which is the shield. and then slowly work my way over to the coolant, bearing hoses and oil line, and then the actuator, and then the intake. Get those out of the way so that way I can get to the spark plug and coils. I think this screw is going to be a little tricky to get to, but I might be able to get in there somehow. If not, I'll use my trusty little 8mm. Get in there. So, that being said, I'm going to try to figure a way to get in there with a universal joint. If I have to, I'll remove this first and then get to the shield. Yeah, looks like I'm gonna have to remove these first. So, starting with the oil line. I'm telling you, the damn mosquitoes in Texas are huge. Side. So I'm gonna get try to work my way in here, but be careful when you're bending this, so that way you don't bend the bracket and break it. Also, at the same time, try not to damage like I did kind of here, but so I was able to pry it out a little bit higher. Then I use my needle nose pliers, kind of wiggle it up to help it up, and it should come out. There you go. All right, making sure I didn't damage anything. That's always important. And then we're gonna change those out in a minute. So I'll move this out of the way. Move it over here. Now, I need my Torx socket here. We'll get this up right now. Right, it's a slow process, so take your time, because the last thing you want to do is break this line. And the reason I have all this down here is because I know the coolant's going to start rushing out. Oops, pull this out. See the rubber seals are just garbage. How bad that is. Let's see if I can show a better view here. Look at that. They're done. Okay, so I moved the top one out of the way. Now, sorry, the upper one. Now let's get the very top one here. This one's a little bit tougher to get out. So I'm gonna have to try to wedge a screwdriver in there to kind of pry it up. But like I said, be very careful. You know, because it's old and it's not gonna want to come out. All right, I'm not sure if you can see, but I did. Oh, it took like a couple seconds, but again, it was like I wedged it in here, and then I just kind of worked my way up And then now I'm just lifting it up. There it is. And as you can see, the rubber seals are just done as well. Look at that. Eventually they're gonna leak. So I'm actually glad I'm doing this. Alright, so I'm gonna move that out of the way a little bit, and then that'll give me access to this. Alright, so it's out. And now the coils are exposed. Obviously these are pretty easy. Just like it's actually a lot easier on this side. For the first two, it's the third one that sits back here. As you can see. There it is. So I had used a 3/16 Allen socket. So the correct millimeter is actually a 6. So that's one. Second bolt. Broke that. Now I gotta get an extension for the little blind here. So the third bolt is actually right below the second bolt, or the furthest bolt, so it sits right below there. Not that one. Let me see if I can get an angle. That one right there, in that corner, that left corner. That one. The third bolt sits right below that one. All right, so now it's time to remove the connector here, and it's just pinching the top. Oh, I forgot to take out the actuator arm. My bad. Maybe that should just pop out fairly easily. There you go. Now, let me get this connector out first. My goodness. There we go. So basically, you got to pinch this top right here. Pinch this little top piece right here, and this should release. All right. So I'll move this out of the way for now. Let's see if I can remove the actuator without having to remove this unit. If not, it's not a big deal. Just a couple screws hanging that hold that up. But yeah, I think I can remove. You know, Yeah, better safe than sorry. I'll go ahead and just remove this. Not a big deal. 2 screws, one top, one bottom. Doesn't look like it has a bracket, so we're good there. One thing I probably did not mention when I did the right-hand side, or the left-hand side rather, was the bolt for this intake. It's actually longer than the other Torx screws for the actuator or the shield. Two. Be careful, this is made out of plastic. There we go. All right, now this actuated out. I guess I should go ahead and change this O-ring as well, but again, it's just the intake. It's not a big deal. I might change it, I don't know. So now you see there's a clear path to the coil. Be careful, you want to cut your finger on this right here. This is supposed to be something that was there before, a bracket that it broke off. So I'm just going to take it off because there's no wires there. I don't want to cut myself on that, but there's supposed to be something there. I don't know what. Anyway, so there you go. Same process as the other side. Pinch the coil, you hear that, and then just lift up. I used a Home Depot the Home Depot mixer here, and able to push it up. As you can see, now it's out. All right. So the coil is actually hanging pretty loose here, as you can see. So when you install it, you don't actually hear a click or anything. I'm gonna reach in here with my little interior pry bar. I'm gonna try, see if I can. Screwdriver instead. There you go. That sucking sound. And there it is. Alright, so I loosened up the screws for the other coil, but I also want to mention to move this out of the way. It gives you more room. Then push the top here until it clicks, and then you can lift. Well, technically you're supposed to be able to lift. Okay, so I got the front one in already, and it was a little difficult to get the connector to connect to the coil, but one little trick I used was really to basically tighten the coil in place. It makes it a little bit easier. Just cross-threading a minute ago. Once that's in, line this up. You can actually pull this booty back if you're able to. So that way you can see the
You alright, Dad?
Yep. Yes, my son asked me if I'm good.
Still doing the exhaust screws?
Nope, I am doing the coil. I'm actually recording. There it is, clicked in. Sorry about that, you guys didn't see it, but I had to move. But it's in now. Clips here. Pull the booty down. And that's it. All I have to do is tighten these screws back up and go to this next one. One thing I forgot to mention was removing the vacuum line for the BRV. It's right back here, so be careful in removing this. Again, it's old and you want to break it. One thing I also need to mention is that once the coil is in place, you want to make a mark right across here, because you're going to have to shave down this screw a little bit, because the actuator, as it sits in like this piece right here, this part will hit up against the screw, and you're not going to be able to line up the this part. You're not going to be able to line up these screws, because that coil is obviously larger than the old coil. So anyway, just mark right across here like I'm about to do now. Here it is, shaved down quite a bit, as you can see. This has to be done on this screw, this last coil. So, like I said, if you don't shave it down, you're not going to be able to fit the actuator in. So you shouldn't have a problem putting the screw into this Torx socket here. As you can see, I know it's a little blurry, but it's not a problem. This only needs about 20 pounds, 20 foot-pounds anyway, so shouldn't be an issue tightening it up. And sometimes you'll have to play with the angle slightly. I'm going with a little bit more aggressive angle on this, as you can see, right there. And now I'm gonna put the actuator on. Back this up a little bit, get it out of the way. All right, now it's time to align the screws, or the screw to the actuator. There we go, that one's in.
All right, the actuator is in. The screws are tightened. One thing I do want to point out is, and I realized this after the fact, that if this little ball for the actuator right here falls back towards the turbo, you can actually lift the actuator itself up and try to get it out. But I recommend putting a screwdriver in here to lift this up and hold it in place, because it actually is a really tight spot to try to pop that thing back on. But yeah, it's not overly difficult. It's just a pain and a very tight spot. But anyway, everything's in place, and as you notice, the screw has been shaved or shaven, and let's see if I get a better angle here. Yeah, that's the best angle I'm going to be able to get, is that right there. But anyway, it's pretty tight. There you go. It's pretty tight, and you definitely have to shave the screw. And like I said, 20 foot-pound torque should be more than enough. And once you shave it, the actuator will go in place. All right, time to put everything back. And I'm gonna go ahead and also change out the O-rings here. Put that back, and then put the vacuum hose back here to the BRV. Make sure that's tight. And then pop this back. And that's pretty much it. And again, don't forget, these are the long screws for this back here.
I just completed the install for the spark plugs and coils, and this is just a recap of what I did. So I started off with removing the catalytic converters, and if you have the OE exhaust, then obviously drop it, but you actually don't have to. You can remove the O2 sensor, but make sure you unplug the cable for the O2 sensor up top. I can't remember if it was the black line or the blue line, but it's very close to the tail light area, or the engine mount. Anyway, if you do that, then you're still limited with some room up here. I highly recommend just taking the exhaust off or dropping the exhaust. And then I also lowered the engine a little bit. It didn't move as much as I thought it would, but I did lower it just a tad though. But I did keep the screws attached to the engine mount. So from there, I removed this clip right here. And then after this clip, I ended up removing the shield bolt here, and then the other one's in here. I removed that one. But before I remove this last one for the shield here, I had to remove the coolant lines, the inlet and outlet, I believe that's what these are, and then the oil line. I didn't go to the back oil line because it was pretty tight, and I was worried that if I removed it, I wouldn't be able to put it back, being one. Two, I was afraid that if I took it out, I wasn't able to put back put new O-rings in there and then reinstall it, because it's such a really tight area. But this was good enough. I changed these out just like I did on the driver's side. So from there, I moved this out of the way. I was able to get to the final bolt for the shield, and then I removed the I guess you can call it the rod, which is that right there. This bad boy right here. Let's see that. The rod for the actuator. There it is. Right there, this one. I removed that, and I just put a screwdriver in there, from this angle and just popped it off. It's really easy. Move that out of the way. I recommend putting that towards the casing or the engine case side, as opposed to letting it drop into the little cavity of the turbo. And then once I remove that, I remove the 3 bolts that held the actuator in place. Sorry, I removed this one right here, and then the second one is back here. It's actually at the top of there it is. That's it right here, that one. And then there's one right below it. So that I was able to loosen this up. And then I unclipped the connector for the actuator. And then I removed the vacuum line for the the BRV in the back here. And then I removed the 2 nuts or screws that held the intake in place. From that point, I was able to basically change out the coils, and then I put everything back in reverse order. One thing I do want to note, that before you put in the actuator, once you have all the coils in place, go ahead and install the shield, because the second nut here, or the screw, this one, was a little tough to get in when this is in. The angle is kind of tough. You're better off getting it from this angle here. You can see the screw right behind, right there. So anyway, I did all that, put it back in, and that was probably about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at most. But yeah, that's pretty much what I did on this side. And that's the recap.